Top stories now with the ITV News at 10.
New Orleans suspect Shamsuddin Jabbar was 100% inspired by the Islamic State group, but acting alone. Today, details of his 14 victims have started to emerge. They include a college student, a young single mother, and a former college football star.
You can't go out there and say, oh, I'm going to put this in place and that in place and hope that evil doesn't show up on your doorstep, because it will. You have to crush it. And that's what we're going to do here.
President Biden said this evening no link has been found so far between that attack and the Tesla Cybertruck that exploded in Las Vegas. We'll talk to Robert in Washington on the progress of the investigations and to Rohit about whether this means Islamic State is resurgent. Also tonight. Arctic weather sweeps across much of the UK as the elderly and vulnerable are warned to keep the heating on. Elon Musk wades into British politics with criticism of Keir Starmer and praise for Tommy Robinson.
Nuke! The nuke!
Teenage Luke Littler in a nail-biting battle for a place in the final of the Darts World Championship.
Bit of Littler tonight, yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
I think Littler will win, but it depends how Littler plays, to be honest.
And Bradford steps into the spotlight as the UK's City of Culture.
This is ITV News at 10 with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. As an act of what the FBI today called premeditated evil, the killing of 14 people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans was terrible enough. But it could have been even worse. The FBI revealed that the terrorist who drove a pickup truck into celebrating crowds had also placed 2 homemade bombs close by. They failed to go off. The agent in charge of the investigation said Shamsuddin Jabbar was, after all, working alone, though he had been 100% inspired by the Islamic State group. The FBI said it could not at the moment find any link with the explosion of a Tesla electric pickup outside a Trump hotel in Las Vegas, despite both men being in the military. The Tesla driver was actually a highly decorated member of US Special Forces.
38 hours on, and a clearer picture is beginning to emerge of the New Orleans massacre on Bourbon Street. On security cameras, the white truck could be seen in traffic before it mounts the pavement to avoid a police car blocking the road. It then accelerated, scattering pedestrians, many just narrowly surviving. Dozens of others were either killed or injured. Police responded with urgency, and the driver was shot dead after a brief gun battle. Shamsuddin Jabbar was a former US soldier from Texas, and it seems a recent convert to the Islamic State. A jihadist with a mission to kill in the opening hours of the new year. FBI agents have pieced together a profile from his social media postings.
In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament.
But that early FBI belief that he was part of a jihadist cell has now receded. The Bureau now suggesting he was, in fact, a so-called lone wolf terrorist. Among the victims of the attack were Kareem Badawi, a freshman at the University of Alabama. Nakira Dado, set to start college with dreams of becoming a nurse. Hubert Gathrow, whose death was confirmed by his former high school. Martin Betch, a former football player at Princeton University turned junior trader. Nicole Perez, a single mother in her late 20s, who had been recently promoted at the deli she worked in, and 37-year-old father of two, Reggie Hunter, described as being full of life by his family. 6 hours after the New Orleans attack, and this Tesla Cybertruck exploded outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. The vehicle was packed full of fireworks and fuel canisters. Whether this was connected to New Orleans is still under investigation, but police are struck by two men with military links, both using their trucks as weapons.
If these turned out to be simply similarities, very strange similarities to have. And so we're not prepared to rule in or rule out anything at this point. There's lots more for us to do in this investigation. We haven't even gotten into the phones or the computers, which are usually very, very instructive and informative to us as we investigate.
The police tonight released new information. The driver was Matthew Livelsberger, a Special Forces soldier from Colorado. His singed military ID and passport were found in the car, helping speed identification. Also found in the wreckage, a number of partially destroyed weapons. The 37-year-old had driven around the hotel before positioning the truck outside the lobby. It's believed he shot himself before the explosion took place. Back in New Orleans, the governor of Louisiana had a clear warning to anyone planning copycat attacks.
You can't go out there and say, oh, I'm going to put this in place and that in place and hope that evil doesn't show up on your doorstep, because it will. You have to crush it. And that's what we're going to do here.
Oh, my God.
The tragedy in New Orleans is a dark start to the new year in a city known around the world for its music and its sense of joy.
And Robert's in Washington. Robert, what's the latest on whether these two attacks are connected or not?
Well, President Biden has spoken about that just in the last hour or so. He says the FBI have briefed him. There is no clear evidence that they can find yet that does connect them. But investigators do not like coincidences. And you heard that sheriff in Las Vegas. There are plenty of strange connections. The two attacks happened 6 hours apart. They happened at iconic American locations, Bourbon Street in New Orleans and just off the Strip in Las Vegas. Both both drivers used the same car rental app, and actually the soldiers also served at some point at Fort Bragg, the same military base in North Carolina. The other dimension to this, Romilly, which is unavoidable here in Washington, is this sense of a political vacuum. We're in the dying days right now of the Biden administration, and President-elect Donald Trump is pushing out some extraordinarily inflammatory social media posts saying that America is falling apart, and also accusing Democrats, the Department of Justice and the FBI of being behind these terrorist attacks, in essence saying that actually they prioritized prosecuting him rather than defending the homeland. So both of these investigations, the one in Las Vegas and the one in New Orleans, are taking place in extraordinarily fraught political times.
Right, Robert, thank you. As we heard there, Shamsuddin Jabbar, the New Orleans attacker, was described as 100% inspired by Islamic State, though apparently not recruited by them. And Rohit joins us now. Rohit, what does this tell us about Islamic State? Can we say from this that it's back as a significant threat?
I think what last night showed so brutally is that this is not the return of IS in the Western world, because the group never actually went away. What we've been saying for the last 5 years, ever since the fall of the caliphate, the sort of territorial defeat of the group inside Syria, was that ISIS existed in two forms: an infrastructure which had been almost destroyed in 2019, but an idea which endured and endures still. This is part of what the FBI has been warning about for the last year. Its director warning about coordinated IS-inspired or directed attacks within the US. And here was one of the hallmarks, one of the traditional motives of IS, so familiar in parts of Europe 9 years ago, the vehicle attack. You'll remember the lorry attack in Nice in 2016. More than 80 people killed, hundreds of people injured. This was a method which was first used and publicised by Al-Qaeda. It was then honed by ISIS, which urged its supporters to do exactly what happened last night, to find the biggest vehicle that they could, to drive it into a crowd, perhaps people packed in down narrow passageways, to then get out of the vehicle, to then use knives or firearms to continue that attack and perhaps to be killed and to call themselves a martyr. This is exactly what happened yesterday. This was from the IS playbook. And so, yes, the group never went away. And there are concerns in Europe as well about what happens next. Of course, this sort of so-called return of IS happens in a world where Islamist extremism has been shaped by events in Gaza, by the new presidency, and by events in Syria as well. The fall of Assad creates a new environment for IS in the Middle East. And of course, against all of this is the backdrop of the internet, where increasingly large parts appear to be ungoverned, where intelligence agencies around the world are worried about the ability of extremists to say almost anything online.
Right, Rohit, thank you. Well, after an unusually mild Christmas, most of the UK is in line for some seriously low temperatures. The UK Health Security Agency has issued cold weather health alerts across England, lasting through until next Wednesday. It's a warning to over 65s and people vulnerable to the cold to keep indoor temperatures above 18 degrees. Meanwhile, the Met Office has issued widespread yellow weather alerts with snow and ice warnings tonight and tomorrow for West Wales, parts of Northern Ireland, much of Scotland and parts of northwest England, where temperatures could fall as low as -8. On Saturday, England and Wales will be worst hit with heavy snow and freezing rain in parts. And by Sunday, almost all of Britain will be under yellow weather warnings as the bitterly cold Arctic weather bites. Cold comfort for those already suffering from New Year floods.
It may look a pretty picture, but this frosty weather has triggered a nationwide health warning. For the next 5 days, experts are warning that already stretched health services will come under increased pressure as temperatures plummet. Those particularly at risk include the elderly and people with respiratory diseases. There is also growing concern for those sleeping rough. As the country braces itself for the next weather events, this part of Greater Manchester is still recovering from one. Cars not stuck in traffic but underwater as a month's worth of rain fell in 24 hours. The pole in this photo, a bus stop, taken from Leanne's window. Evacuated from her apartment, she's still not allowed back inside.
The water just came, and it came so quickly in the space of about 40 minutes. The garage was full because it's on a slope. All the water just kept running in, and it was just like quite overwhelming.
This hotel, still blocked off by floodwater, was housing 500 refugees and asylum seekers. They had to be rescued by boat. Bedding piled high in the local mosque, where many of them slept overnight.
Few vulnerable people, dementia, disabilities, illnesses. Obviously, some of them was refugees. Some were obviously from residents as well. So some were distressed. Lots of children didn't know what was going on.
Although the river levels are still fairly high today, yesterday they were measured at levels that were the highest on record at almost 12 foot. The water so high, hundreds were trapped in their flats.
No power, no transport, no clean water. So this is a really great start to 2025, everyone.
Depressed, I suppose, because obviously I've lost my car, somewhere to live. It's hard for people.
The emergency services had to rescue 1,000 people.
I've served for nearly 3 decades now, and I've never managed the multi-agency response, working with police and councils and volunteers from the Red Cross and mountain rescue and a whole range of people, where we need to rescue 1,000 people in a day from their homes. So it is fairly unprecedented.
Health bosses say the cold weather is expected to have a significant impact across health and social care, and a warning that as temperatures fall, deaths could rise. Kelly Foran, News at 10, Manchester.
The diplomatic convention that one country doesn't get involved in the politics of another is clearly not something that troubles the world's richest man and Donald Trump's war on waste czar, Elon Musk. Mr. Musk's latest attack on Labour and Sir Keir Starmer over not prosecuting child sex gangs has been taken up by the Conservatives. And Anushka is here now. Anushka, I can't imagine these comments are going down very well in Downing Street.
Well, I mean, what they're not going to do is respond directly to Elon Musk, but they are very frustrated about all of this. This all began in Oldham, where there has been a scandal involving grooming gangs over many years, which we know about. There wasn't local inquiry, but the victims' groups wanted more scrutiny. So the council wrote to the government and said, will the Home Office back a new inquiry? They got a letter in response saying, look, do a local inquiry, but central government shouldn't get involved in this. That was put up on X, Elon Musk's social media site, and Liz Truss, our former Prime Minister, came on and said Jess Phillips was the Home Office Minister involved, to which we had this extraordinary response from Elon Musk, where he said Jess Phillips deserves to be in jail. Now, that has caused real upset in government, partly because Jess Phillips actually supported an inquiry in Oldham, just didn't want central government to be involved. She also points out that actually, these locally led inquiries happened under the Conservative government. It was their policy. And nevertheless, the Conservatives have now entered this and said that there should be a national inquiry all into this. I think what it all shows is that Elon Musk has massive influence at the moment, and he really doesn't like Keir Starmer. He's all for Reform UK. He says that only reform can save Britain.
And how is Nigel Farage feeling about all of that?
Well, I think he is delighted that Elon Musk wants, reform to do well. He's delighted by the prospect that maybe Elon Musk could give reform a lot of money. But there is one interesting thing going on here, which is another thing Elon Musk has been tweeting about, is Tommy Robinson, the far-right anti-Islam activist who is in jail at the moment because he defamed a Syrian refugee and continued to do that even when a court ordered him to stop. Now, Elon Musk is tweeting, free Tommy Robinson. And here's the thing for Nigel Farage. He might enjoy the attention from Elon Musk, but he does not like Tommy Robinson. In fact, he was one of the reasons that he left UKIP. He said he didn't want to be associated with him.
Complicated. Thank you. The campaigns to make people get tested for cancer are working. More people in England than ever before are being diagnosed early at stage 1 or 2 of the disease when treatment is more successful. A rare bit of good news at the start of 2025. But before we get too carried away, there's not such good news on treatment. Nearly 1 in 3 diagnosed patients are not starting their treatment within the 2-month target.
Her granddaughter's prom, her grandson's graduation. Moments Janet Cowley counts herself lucky to have seen after a routine scan following a shoulder operation picked up signs of cancer on her lung.
Being older, you just think of cancer as a death sentence. And you don't realise that if you get early detection, that it can't save your life like it did with me.
Janet is one of a record number of patients with the most common cancers like breast, prostate or lung being diagnosed before the disease has a chance to spread to elsewhere in the body. It follows a relentless focus on early diagnosis.
We've been running a lot of public awareness campaigns, and we've also started to look at the people at highest risk, such as people who've smoked who are over the age of 55, where we offer them a targeted lung health check and the opportunity to have a CT scan if there's a chance of them having lung cancer.
But there's more work to be done. The NHS wants 75% of cancers to be detected at stage 1 or 2 by 2028. That would mean diagnosing around 34,000 additional patients at an earlier stage. But survival rates also hinge on getting rapid access to treatment. NHS England has a target of 85% of patients starting it within 62 days of being referred. But fewer than 69% are currently meeting that target, and it's now been 9 years since it was last hit. That's one of the reasons why the UK continues to lag behind comparable countries. Take a look at this chart on breast cancer, for example, which shows that although survival rates have been improving in the UK, we are still 5 or 6 percentage points behind places like the US and Japan. And while Janet's lung cancer was caught and treated in time, her brother's wasn't. The two of them best friends since childhood.
He was diagnosed the same time as me, but he wasn't as lucky as me. I just feel guilty that I survived and he didn't.
She wants anyone offered an NHS check or a scan to take it.
There's probably people out there that were stubborn like me and wouldn't even think about going for these tests. But 5 minutes out of your life can save your life.
A New Year's resolution worth keeping. Rachel Younger, News at 10.
The rapper Stormzy won't be behind the wheel of his Rolls-Royce anytime soon. He was banned from driving for 9 months for using his phone. An undercover police officer caught him at it last March in West London. Stormzy wasn't in court in Wimbledon today. He pleaded guilty in a letter. He'd already got 6 points on his licence for a speeding offence. Cumbria is already home to more than its fair share of the country's hills and mountains. It's also home to a big nuclear power plant, Sellafield, with all the radioactive waste that goes with it. With a massive stockpile of the stuff in the UK, a permanent fix is needed. One solution's already underway, adding to the dramatic Cumbrian landscape with a safe and specially constructed nuclear storage hill.
Behind this barbed wire is the core of Cumbria's newest hill. Shipping containers filled with concrete and nuclear waste.
We're now entering a radiologically designated area. We'll check that our personal dosimeters are turned on and they'll monitor us while we're walking through this engineered vault.
This is the first time our cameras have been allowed in to film this highly controlled landfill for low-level radioactive waste. The full half of the site is about to become a permanent part of the landscape.
So if we were to come back here in 200 or 300 years' time, we'll essentially be under a giant hill, maybe 15 or 20 metres above the top of these containers.
So you wouldn't know it's here?
You wouldn't know it's here.
Covering this site in enough earth to turn it into a hill, posing no risk to future generations, is no small task. It will require 1 million cubic metres of aggregate like this. That's enough to fill 370 Olympic swimming pools. That's nothing compared with the amount of nuclear waste this country will have produced by the end of the century. A pile twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The majority of the bulk can be shallow buried, but things like spent fuel rods from neighbouring Sellafield stay dangerously radioactive for tens of thousands of years.
Wishing it would go away is never really a good strategy when it comes to radioactive waste.
Instead, one idea is to try and build a facility like this one in Finland, a so-called geological solution to embed the waste into rock off either the Lincolnshire or Cumbrian coast.
Compared to a site like this, geological disposal, be deep underground, up to 1,000 metres below the ground. The containers will be slightly different. They'll be more highly engineered containers. It's a more complex solution, but very, very similar in principle. It's about multi-barriers between people, the environment and the radioactive waste.
Finding a site requires the right geology and the right amount of buy-in from people living locally, not to mention the cost, which could, over decades, exceed £50 billion. Martin Stew, News at 10, Cumbria.
It's another big night for Luke Littler. The teenage darts star is scrapping for place in his second World Championship final in tonight's semi against fellow Englishman Stephen Bunting. Littler has the upper hand, you might say.
Luke, the nuke!
This time last year, the world was just waking up to the talent of Luke Littler. Now fans are familiar with his walkout music and screamed along as the party got started at the World Darts Championship semi-final tonight. The 17-year-old faces an opponent twice his age in Stephen Bunting.
The bullet, Stephen Bunting!
Whose lookalike son cheering him on in the crowd has earned him a loyal following. But outside Alexandra Palace, as the crowds arrived, there was a firm favourite.
I watched him back in the Prem and he was classed in. He's just too good.
Yeah, definitely all the way, all the way.
Littler all the way.
Bit of Littler tonight, yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
I think Littler will win, but it depends how Littler plays, to be honest. I think I'm going to go maybe 5-2 to Littler.
I'm one game away.
It was a confident start for the Bullet, Bunting, who seemed to keep the teenager on his toes. But Littler found his stride quickly too and claimed the first set.
No, we will not. The first set goes to Luke Littler.
An earlier match decided who the winner of this one will face in the final. Three-time champion Michael van Gerwen has made it through to his 7th title clash.
To his 7th world final.
Luke Littler was close to clutching the trophy last year, but had to settle for second. Still not a bad result for a debut.
8-8 for 4-0.
Could a different story be emerging tonight? He's still a teenager, but now a seasoned star of the sport. The battle of the Bullet and Luke the Nuke continues. Ellie Pitt, News at 10.
The new year has begun in Glasgow with a match embracing that old football rivalry between Celtic and Rangers. This afternoon, Rangers came out on top. They outplayed a lacklustre Celtic. Yanis Hadji opened the scoring with a low drive that caught the Rangers goalkeeper Kasper Schmeichel flat-footed. Rangers won 3-0, but Celtic are still 11 points ahead of them at the top of the table. It seems the cold, clear weather, which chilled the crowds at that match, is likely to provide good conditions again for seeing the Northern Lights. This was last night over Shetland. Tonight, there's another reason for keeping your eyes on the sky. One of the best meteor showers of the year should be visible, with up to 120 shooting stars every hour. The best time to see them is around 3 in the morning, one for the night owls. Finally, a different kind of Northern Lights, the cultural highlights that will be illuminating what was once one of the UK's great industrial powerhouses. Bradford is beginning its run as the latest UK city of culture. It's already one of the most multicultural places in the country. Now it's welcoming the world.
This city believes it is their time to shine. In recent years, Bradford has gained a reputation as one of the nation's bleakest places. But those living here and its businesses hope its new status as a UK city of culture gives it a boost.
I hope this year Bradford is put on the map. Everybody's perception changes of what they think Bradford's about. Come and see for yourself, come and see the excitement, come and see the wonderful things that are happening. Look at today, for instance. 1,000 people behind us ready to enjoy culture.
Several national surveys have declared the West Yorkshire city as one of the UK's gloomiest places to live, in part because it sees the least sunshine. But Bradford once burned brightly as one of the UK's biggest industrial cities and was known as the wool capital of the world. It is also where the Bronte sisters are from. And more recently, One Direction's Zayn Malik grew up here. Those working in the city hope its history inspires more visitors to come.
I don't think there's any name that's better known in the country or internationally than David Hockney, who, of course, was born in Bradford. We're in the Hockney Gallery today. This collection was built up to reflect the importance not only of David Hockney, but of the place of Bradford.
Does Bradford deserve its reputation, do you think?
Well, I don't think it does, actually, and I think that's it's totally undeserved. You know, that it isn't known, you know, really, because it's a place that's rich in culture, rich in diversity, and in terms of the creative landscape that has been inspired by West Yorkshire, I don't think there's a place that's better.
Bradford has faced the same challenges as many other post-industrial cities in northern England, but those living here are mostly proud to call it their home.
Do you like living here?
Yes.
What is it you like about it?
Everything. People, they're nice, and you can have a laugh with them.
I wouldn't say I like living here because obviously you look around you, what do you see? People don't love it, and obviously the jobs here are very hard to find.
My son was born here. It's really multicultural city, so it's quite lively.
We might have entered the gloomiest time of the year, but this city is starting 2025 on a high. Amy Lewis, News at 10, Bradford.
Just before we go, a quick update from the darts, and teenager Luke Littler is edging closer to making the final at the World Championship. He's 4 sets to 1 up. His opponent, Stephen Bunting, took the last set, but Littler very much on top. And that is all for tonight from me and all of us. Good night.
Happy New Year.